So welcome. This is part of mine's guide to fitting an Eberspacher in a Citroen Relay camper van. This is the technical bits we're going to cover this morning, and it applies to fitting this style of heater in a van or in a boat, in a truck, or if you want to fit one in a workshop, all the rest of it, it's totally fine. So we'll get started. It's going to be a little bit technical this morning. Please don't get scared and run away the second I move this bit of paper, because we do have an exploded diagram. As I say, I'm not sure whether you'll be watching this at the beginning or the end of the video series, so I'll try and be as in-depth as possible, and bear in mind some people may have seen it, some people may have not seen the rest of the videos. So the main body of the unit is just here in this diagram, so there's your actual heater. So this is the main thing we consider to be an Eberspacher when we think about it. We've got a few other things we need to consider, and I broke the video series down into a few different sections. So one part of the video series is on actually, let's get a pen that works, is actually on the mounting, and as part of the mounting we're looking at the exhaust system and the intake system, which is just there, and we're looking at actually fixing the main heater into the floor. There's a few things we need to consider when doing this, so we'll just go through all the bits and then we'll get started on individual sections. As well as the mounting the actual body of the unit, the other thing we've got to kind of consider is this section here. This is the fuel section, so this is the fuel pump and lines, and that consists of, we have a pipe that comes out of the bottom of the heater, which is going to be underneath the vehicle. We have a small rubber hose just there. You could do it with solid fuel lines all the way. Generally, a lot of the installations I've done, I've always used sections of rubber hose just here, Jubilee clip on either side of it, and then a section of pipe that runs to the pump. Generally, I think the internal diameter of this is about 4 or 5 millimeters. We have another hose, piece of rubber hose here, and the rubber hose just goes over this solid fuel, this rigid fuel pipe. The Jubilee clip goes onto the fuel pump itself. So this is the actual pump just there. It's quite small, no bigger than a normal automotive one, kind of this size. That mounts remotely from the heater, so the fuel pump's not actually in the heater. We mount that further away from the heater, and then we have another hose that leads to our fuel system. If you were installing this into quite a few vans, what you do is you'd end up using one of these, a T-piece. So you just tee into a fuel line that's running to your engine, which is not very difficult to do. I may do a video on doing that if people ask for it, but the installation I'm going to look at is using one of these just here, which is a stand pipe. And the reason for using that is explained in one of my other videos. It's to do with the pressures in the fuel lines in the Citroen Relay, but we actually have to install this into the fuel tank, which again isn't a difficult task if you know what you're doing, and if not, I'm hoping I've provided enough information that anybody could kind of do it. After the heater, we've got the heater mounted, we've got the exhaust and the intake for the burner, then we have a look at the fuel lines. After that, all we've got to do is wire it up, and that consists of literally just here plugging the main unit itself into the wiring loom, which is 3 cables. One of them runs to our fuel pump, so we have a cable going from here to a fuel pump. This cable here is actually quite a few meters long, probably 5 meters of cable, 4 or 5 meters of cable there. Just runs to our fuel pump. Another one goes to where we get our power from, and a mini Eberspacher power line. So this goes to our battery or whatever kind of power source we're using for this, and then we have another cable which goes to a controller. There's a lot of controllers available. I'm not too sure of the particular one shown in this diagram here. I do have one of these in a box somewhere, but the one I'm going to be looking at in my van is the 701 timer, which is a 7-day programmable timer. So the way the Eberspacher works is there's 2 sides to it. So it's a box. We have 2 sides to it. In one side we have an intake and an outflow on the bottom of the unit, and this comes in, and that's where our kind of fire is. That's where we've got a little turbine. It's obviously ever so slightly more complicated than this, but that's what we're going with. And then on the body of the heater itself, we have an in and we have an out. And in there, all we've got is we've got a heat exchanger that transfers that heat. So the air that actually flows in through this pipe here and out through this pipe here never actually goes near the combustion itself. That's out in a separate place which vents through these pipes out through the floor of the van. So we don't have to have problems with gas exchange and things like that, and that's how the system works. So there's just a fan that draws air over a heater grill to warm the air that comes into the van. There are limits on how long we can have. Obviously, all of these pipes, this pipe here, there's limits on how the angles we can mount this at, etc. So that's what we'll have a look at next day. So move that to one side. Mounting the unit itself. So the unit, and hopefully I managed to keep some of the same terminology. So that's actually mounting the unit itself, the heater unit just here. So things we've got to consider is the position of it. We need it to be mounted so that the intake and outflow can exit. So ideally on the base of the van. You can get external mounts. I'm not a big fan due to the fact that any salt, any road spray, all of that is going to end up on your heater, and it's probably not going to last as long. I'm quite fond of keeping them in good nick because they're quite expensive. The angles that we can actually mount the heater, if we think about this is an end-on view, so this is looking onto the heater this way, and then we'll draw it the other way very briefly for you. So I'm not the best of sketches here. We've got two pipes coming out of the bottom. With the heater in this orientation, we've actually got to mount it pretty much 90 degrees. So that has got to be relatively flat. It will stand a little bit of a swaying and things in a boat, but it can't really mount the heater on its side or anything like that. The vents have to come out of the bottom. As far as it goes for mounting in this orientation, this plane, it's less crucial. It'll actually withstand starting, apparently according to the technical drawings, up to 15-degree angle. So we could have this mounted on, say, that kind of angle, it wouldn't matter. And once it's running, it could stand up to 30 degrees. So once it's running, if you were in a boat and it's tipping from side to side, actually we could maintain that. It's not a problem up to 30 degrees, but it won't ideally start above 15-degree angle. It probably would fire up, but it'd not run very well. So the other thing with mounting the unit is generally you want it out of the way. There is a bit of noise that comes from it. Obviously it's got a little turbine in there, there's a battery with a fan, so there is a bit of noise. Ideally mounting away from where you are or inside a compartment. They say not to mount them in the living quarters. I don't know if that's to do with noise. It's probably to do with noise and risk of fumes. With the units, I tend to mount them either as far away as possible or under a bed, things like that, where they've got a little bit of sound cushioning. The limiting factor on where we can put it is one where we've got an actual flat bit of ground we can put it on. The van has been this shape of looking down from above or from below, but actually under there you've probably got a lot of beams and cross members, and I think my van is something like this with cross members. So obviously where these cross members are, or where say the exhaust system is that exits the van, I can't mount my unit there because there's not enough room for it to go through the floor without damaging these cross members. And these cross members are structurally important, so we don't want to go damaging any of those. Wiring, it's how long your cables are. If it's a new installation, you get quite a lot of cable, more than you could need, or in a kind of a normal van say need. It's 5 meters, 6 meters of cabling. As if you're getting the unit from an older vehicle that's used, it's worth getting every bit of cabling we can. So try and recover as much of that cable as possible, because it is going to come in handy. You can extend certain wires, such as the fuel pump. I know people who've made the fuel pump wire slightly longer because when they've got one it's been cut off. You can just extend them, and the pump's not as sensitive to voltage drop or polarity as you'd imagine. But I've not had any experience of extending, such as this main part of the loom here. It all depends on your voltage drop things. It's another subject altogether. Any issues on that, get in touch. I'll try and solve it for you, but right now I can't really say much about it. So fuel pump is the next part. So we've looked at mounting the heater and the angles and things that'll survive through. The next thing we're going to have a look at is this fuel line here. So a few considerations on where we mount this. The biggest one for me is the noise. It clicks. It's not the loudest thing in the world. Once you're used to it, you sleep through it, but there's definitely an audible click, and I have found that it's not so much it's kept me up, but say I've pulled up at somewhere, it's kept the neighbours up around me. So definitely worth putting it somewhere. And how I've got around this is I've actually chosen to mount this in the engine bay. I figure that's where the most soundproofing is, and when you think of the layout of a van, it's as far forward from the sleeping compartment as possible. The positioning of this unit, it can kind of go anywhere. It's not really as sensitive in terms of dirt, things like that. We can kind of protect it a little bit. I do tend to mount these either under the van, as I was saying, the engine bay. The main things to consider is actually the pipes and the length of pipes available. You can't indefinitely extend the pipes. Unfortunately, we've got a max of 5 meters on the D2 units. From tank, so from the tank to the unit to the pump, we've got 5 meters maximum, and then the high pressure side that goes to our unit, we've got a maximum of 6 meters. Which you think 5 meters in a straight line, 6 meters in a straight line, well, 11 meters, that's quite long, but once we've routed the cable around and taken it through different sections, it's surprisingly maybe going to be a limiting factor there. As with everything, we've got to think angles as well. So the maximum angle, as far as we go, is we can go up to 90 degrees. So up to this plumb line here. So we can mount up to 90 degrees in this kind of orientation, and the unit will be all right with that. It's not a problem. We said this is okay. Ideally, we want to be somewhere between 15 and 35 degrees. That's the kind of optimum level. Anything else down here is all a big no-no. On the way I think of it is, here's the connector. We don't want our electrics to point downwards. If they're below that 15 degrees, your pump will excessively wear. It'll be noisier than usual, and it's something to do with the air that'll get trapped inside here. I'm not 100% why, but it just doesn't work. So we don't want this mounting downhill unless you want to have to buy a new fuel pump after a very short period of time. So in my main videos I don't really cover much of the mounting of these, but definitely something we need to consider. It's just try and keep the video size down on the others. So what I'm going to say is we'll cut it there. I'm going to go for a part 2, and on the part 2 we're going to have a look at the ducting. So the internal ducting within the van and the kind of maximum capacities, things to consider when routing that, and hopefully that'll cover it. The only other thing to add is we won't do too much on the electrics, but the electrics, it's either 12 volt or 24 depending on your unit. Steppers from 12 to 24 and 24 to 12 aren't great, so I would advise just getting yourself a unit that runs on the power you have available. The reason is you get quite a bit of voltage loss, and it's very difficult to drop exactly the correct amount. Brilliant. So hopefully that's not bored you too much. Any questions, just drop them in the comments box. I'll try and answer them. I'm not an Eberspacher trained technical person. All the stuff I've picked up from varying manuals, and I have got under here somewhere a few links. So Latonkus varnish, great resource. Butler Technic, lots of online diagrams there. And then Dometic 3 front end qbank.se is where you find the marine heater installation guides, which are actually incredibly useful. So awesome, thanks for watching. Be sure to check out part 2 of this video on the technical bits, where I'll cover the ducting and things like that. Thanks again, bye.